We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Our topic today is consequence for Brazil of Trump's energy decisions. Welcome, Cleveland Jones, Professor Cleveland Jones.
Great to be with you, Cavagna. This is an interesting topic. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, this is the profile of Professor Cleveland Jones. It could be interesting, Professor, to make a disclaimer at the
Yeah,
beginning of our program that I could say that we do not love nor Trump, neither Biden. We do not have parties.
yeah,
And so we support only our independence to think and to explain things here.
yeah. I think it's important, Cavagna, that we put some of this emotion aside and look at what we think the consequences are from a rational analysis. Everybody has their opinions and so on, but when we're looking at consequences of geopolitical decisions, government policy, and so on, we should try to be as rational as possible. I have no axe to grind with Trump policies. I can't defend Biden's policies or the Democratic agenda, but I think what we have to say here is important, and people have to understand that I might be wrong, and like I said in other programs, check back with me in a couple of years and see what happens. But we'll take
of course,
no
only opinions.
Yeah.
Only opinions. Let me start with you checking if you agree with me or not that rising U.S. oil and gas production could reduce Brazil's crude oil exports to the U.S. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, trade flows will definitely be impacted by Trump policies. Exactly how and in which commodities we don't exactly know, but it is true that for example, in oil, if Trump has a big focus on increasing exports, which I think he won't be able to do very quickly because oil exports are not, and oil production are not easy to increase rapidly, and that may take a while. But when and if preferred status for exports or for countries that are sending oil to the U.S. are determined, of course, he will pick countries very selectively.
That's a good point. How much time, how long takes when we take a decision today to start increasing oil production?
Well, first of all, it isn't the government's decision. That has to be clear. The government energy policies, not just petroleum policies, are like a string. You can pull back on the industry and slow it down and not let it develop, but you can't push with a string.
Investors are different from the government.
So what we were seeing in the past is the oil and gas industry was being hindered to some extent. It's questionable how much, but yes, it was being hindered. And now it won't be hindered as much. And of course, a lot of new areas, but there's no obligation to go into those areas. Companies don't follow what Trump says just because he says it, because we still have an open free economy. So the oil companies will look at opportunities to make money. If they see opportunities to make money in new areas, they will go. I don't think they see that. And in any case, it's important to recognize that what we have now, in part caused by this turmoil of government policy changes in the U.S., we have less stability and predictability in the oil markets, in oil prices. And that is harmful to investment decisions.
So do you believe that price can be affected with this decision?
I think in the end, we could have lower oil prices, which Trump is pushing for. Now, obviously, that is not in the interest of the oil companies, but if the oil companies perceive that there is instability in the global situation and oil prices may not be as firm as they are now, or they may have weaknesses, or even prices may crop up, that puts a damper on investment. So that is the biggest if in the whole petroleum, oil, gas, energy policy dialogue. And it could be counterproductive. Now, the oil industry is a big boy, has a lot of money, it knows what it's doing, and it can pursue many attractive opportunities in the U.S., and many majors are based in the U.S. They can pursue opportunities outside if they make sense.
but these decisions can affect the availability and of services providers, for instance, technology providers for the world, because the intense investments at this time in the United States may affect this availability.
Yeah, except that I don't see that having repercussions quickly. I think the first thing that might be affected is that the investment dollars available to invest in oil price, whether they be in Brazil, Africa, Southeast Asia, or wherever, they may be a little bit scarcer, or they may require a higher internal rate of return to make those decisions a goal. So that could potentially harm some opportunities overseas, while, of course, making more capital available to the U.S. But if the industry sees that oil prices don't make a great business case, they won't invest, and they won't invest in the U.S. or anywhere else because they had a very bad experience in the shale patch in the past. They lost some money, and they now are very cautious. There's capital discipline, so they will only invest when they can think they can make money, and that is very healthy. It's very good. The oil industry should operate like that. It should not make crazy investments or follow someone's word just because he says so. So that is healthy for the oil industry. On the other hand, that may not increase oil production as fast as maybe Trump would like. That is a different case than the LNG case. The liquefied natural gas
Natural
market,
gas.
yeah, natural gas is likely to grow and is likely to continue to expand its exports. And of course, Trump will pressure more countries to import its LNG as opposed to Qatar or Australia or somewhere else. But the market is big. There's no real crisis as to, you take gas from me and I don't know where to put my gas. No, the market is big. Maybe there'll be more
So
transportation costs.
you see easier to solve natural gas and LNG than oil
Yeah,
production
it's
currently
maybe
in the
not a
United States.
problem. It's just a natural growth that I think is there. We spoke last program about natural gas projects, and they're popping up all over the world. The U.S. is the undisputed leader, and it will continue to be and growing in importance. And that is healthy for the U.S. and not necessarily bad for the world because the world will have a lot of LNG, which is relatively cheap in relation to other energy sources. And the U.S. can still make money because its natural gas prices are just so cheap that it's incredible.
Let's move a little bit to renewables. The decision to remove subsidies to wind energy investments. How do you see this decision?
Yeah, there are many wind projects that still make sense even in the U.S. and there will be pushback even by red states. There are Republican states. Well, the top wind states are Republican states, and their constituencies will try to defend those projects because they're money. There is an old adage in politics that said, "Oh, it's the economy, stupid." No, it's the money, stupid. And when you're talking big investments into wind projects and they can make money for someone, even if it's oil companies or whatever, they're not going to want to let go of that. Now, I'm not saying that they make as much money as some oil plays maybe, but they're already there and they are profitable the way they set them up. Maybe new projects will be rethought, but there's not going to be cancellation en masse, any of that kind of stuff.
And can affect Brazil's investments in energy, renewable
I don't
energies?
think so. In general, we spoke some programs back that I said I think LNG is maybe beginning to see the end, and I wasn't being facetious. I really think that wind energy is nearing a tipping point. Maybe still 5 years away or a little bit more. But wind energy does not have very great prospects overall in the world as solar and nowadays even fossils too. So wind energy is going to be a niche project. In Brazil, there are many projects that are viable only because there are takers for the products, for the fuels that are going to be produced with clean energy, electric energy of wind. It doesn't make technical sense, it's inefficient, but if there are takers, those projects will go on. And they're working and they will be implemented, and Brazil will export hydrogen or green methanol or ammonia or whatever. But they make
So do you see Brazil still investing in renewables, especially in wind in the northeast part of the country?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say Brazil. I think foreign investors will invest in Brazil
That's right. That's
because
right.
the investors are who? Basically European companies who are willing to take the green fuels that Brazil can produce, and that will go on. I think some of the incentives might be taken out because realization is settling in, and I don't think Trump made this decision. I think we discussed this before. It's becoming clear that a lot of green fuels just don't merit the attention that they're getting, and some do. For example, the nuclear revival merits a lot of attention. Maybe that can draw attention, interest, and investment from some of these other alternatives.
Let me share with you for
Yes.
ethanol, the export of ethanol from the US to Brazil. So these 2 last years we didn't have export to Brazil. Why?
It's a boom and bust cycle, right? When Brazil was promoting its ethanol consumption, of course, the U.S. made up for the shortfall, and then Brazil caught up in production. And I think despite the last 2 years were bad years for ethanol production in Brazil, this year very likely to be roaring back, and production will increase a lot. There's no likelihood that Brazil will need to import at least any significant amounts, maybe very occasional amounts of ethanol from anywhere. And Brazil will likely continue to grow its ethanol production to rival the United States, which is the leader. And that green energy is one of the most justifiable, sustainable green energies, bioenergies. It's not so much in the U.S. where there are higher costs and so on, but in Brazil, it's an undisputed leader.
But so you say that it should be the opposite. Brazil should be exporting ethanol to the
Yes.
United States.
And I think, well, maybe not to the United States because the U.S. is still a major producer, and it will continue to be a major ethanol producer, enough maybe to meet its mandates, which are likely to be reduced somewhat. Only California has high mandates. But, Brazil will have opportunities to export ethanol to other countries. And the United States should not have anything to say about that because, it's no skin off their back. But it is important that the U.S. Ethanol industry, which is ag, and the agriculture sector in the Midwest is very important, especially to the electorate that elected Trump, be defended.
And Brazil is transforming a sugar cane to corn based to
Well,
ethanol
it's
production.
complementing sugarcane production with corn production for ethanol, and I think it's not bad. I mean, the United States produces most of its ethanol from corn, and I think that discussion about using food to make fuel, that's past. There's no shortage of corn around the world. There
No.
won't be, even if Brazil or the U.S. or India or whoever starts growing more food crops for ethanol. Obviously, each country has to be careful how they balance that, and Brazil has done a good job at it. The U.S. certainly has no food shortages. And this question about one or the other or food prices doesn't apply. I mean, we're talking about really different kinds of corn, different kinds of sugar cane. All the sugar cane can produce sugar, but there is no shortage of that. So the outcome is that Brazil is likely to continue to be able to grow its biofuel production of ethanol, just like India and maybe other countries will as well.
Let's move a little bit to environmental aspects.
Yeah.
How do you see the trend for fires in our Amazon forests, considering Trump existence?
I think that even those who don't like Trump can't say that this is Trump's fault. Brazil has been disastrous in administering its environmental policy, whether it's this administration or whatever. And in fact, I believe that the Amazon itself is close to a tipping point. Many other people do. And this would not be good for the world. On the other hand, it isn't anybody's desire to do this. It's basically inept policies from the Brazilian government preventing deforestation. And even the agricultural sector in Brazil, the big exporters, they are not in favor of destroying the Amazon forest because they know they depend on it for rains and production. And the good producers are all basically certified in the test that they don't do a lot of deforestation. There's always bad players here and there. But it's government policy that failed, not the industry. So the U.S. is not at fault. Europe is not at fault. They all trying to benefit in some way. European countries tried to prevent, the agreement with the U.S. with Brazil for exporting agricultural commodities and alleged environmental mismanagement. That may all be true, but in the end, it doesn't favor anybody to prevent this. The likely outcome is that Brazil will be successful in its efforts to deal with the United with Europe, the European Union, and exports will continue to increase there and elsewhere because deforestation is finally probably coming down and is in the interest of Brazil because Brazil is potentially the largest seller of environmental credits, carbon credits, lack of deforestation credits in the world. And if it gets its act together, it can literally reap tens of billions of dollars from not doing deforestation. So this is just a no-brainer. It will go ahead, and it's not Trump, it's not the European Union, it's no one that will prevent this.
Yeah. Let's go a little bit to EVs, subsidies.
Yeah.
We didn't see Tesla's cars in Brazil. Do you see that Trump can force these exports to Brazil of Tesla cars?
I've seen BYD cars in Brazil. I haven't seen Tesla.
A lot of them.
Yeah, I saw one Tesla car, but it doesn't work that way. When any country, even with the strength in the background and the force that the U.S. has, tries to unilaterally force the issue of particular imports. One thing is policy, another thing is individual industries, individual products. That is destined for failure. And it's not destined for failure because Brazil can react, Colombia couldn't react, Brazil can't react. It's not that. It's the fact that economics come into play. And it's not, Tesla or the U.S., it's the Chinese who are the problem. Why are we looking at Brazil as a market or the U.S. Tesla as a producer? It's China, the market and the producer supplying the world that is making the decisions. And it's not even Trump. He can do away with the credits or he can double the credits. Nothing will make a difference other than Chinese policy.
You mentioned Colombia and remind myself about the situation of Colombia last days, the scary situation.
Yeah.
Do you see that Brazil can pass with this pressure of Trump the same way?
I think Brazil has an opportunity. I think it can actually benefit from some of the policies that Trump is promoting and promising to implement. It can probably benefit from the ag sector. It can probably benefit from the energy sector. But it does suffer a large risk that eventually, in geopolitics, this happens, like that. A mistake, a bad word, something someone says, either Trump or President Lula in Brazil, and all of a sudden you can have a crisis, and that is a risk that you can't brush aside. Trump talks a lot off the cuff, and unfortunately, Brazil's president does that too. And that is a recipe to get into a problem. So unless they both are, well, Trump is not going to be careful, but unless Brazil's president is careful, that could be a distressing situation. I think it wouldn't be long lasting, and in fact, Brazil probably can overcome that, but it is a risk. And in any case, the risk has some lasting consequences, such as is the attractiveness of the country for a foreign capital diminished in any way? And if that is perceived as having occurred just by Trump's policy or by a crisis, that can hurt Brazil because Brazil is heavily dependent on inflows of capital for many of its industries.
My last slide. Are we competitive friends with the United States? Because we do not have space collaboration or cooperation with the United States. Only with the United States. We have several different cooperations with different countries.
Yeah, this is a natural result of what I guess would be in classical economics, natural advantages of countries. Brazil, an equatorial country, well, of course, have a very great advantage in launching sites and so on. But beyond that, the agreements are basically due to BRICS and so on, and with the EU, with Canada. But the U.S. has no axe to grind here either. It already has a big presence in launching sites, both in Texas and Florida. It doesn't depend on Brazil, and Brazil doesn't depend on the U.S. So these agreements might actually develop even more. One of the results, I think, is that Brazil and the BRICS in general might end up being even more cohesive because, in fact, most of the BRICS and Brazil have more affinity with China, for example, than with the U.S. And this is the same for India and now Indonesia and so on. So it is not something that Trump can control because now you get to the point where you have too big a block to really push against. So I think even the U.S. will be somewhat careful. They can try to impose tariffs and so on. But remember, economics is a theory, a law, and that is not able to be violated. If you impose tariffs, no matter how many analysts say, gee, the United States could actually come out ahead, well, temporarily, maybe in the short term and so on.
Yeah, temporarily,
there are
yes.
no winners from increased tariffs, certainly from across the board tariffs, sectoral tariffs, and so on. So everybody loses. That is guaranteed by economic theory. Now, in the short term, sure, you can, maybe threaten tariffs.
You can force someone to go here
and you can force their hand. But that is a very dangerous policy. So the U.S. also runs the risk of some of these things backfiring. Not right now because Trump is on the run and all this, but we have to be aware that things can go wrong and all of a sudden we can have a reset. One perfect example of this we saw in AI because Trump promised $500 billion.
DeepSeek is moving.
And all of a sudden, which I don't put a lot of faith in DeepSeek because that's a minimal player and it doesn't mean much. But you can see how critical these things are on very flimsy details because it's an insignificant player. A lot of other players in China can be much more significant. A lot of chip players can do much more. A lot of other players that are not even in the AI scenario can get in and be significant players. And all of a sudden, you see how susceptible the world scenario is to an upheaval, which basically costs $1 trillion of valuation of U.S. companies.
That's right. My conclusion is that you are very optimistic with a relationship between the U.S. and Brazil. Is it true?
I am optimistic, guardedly so, but I believe there's fundamental reasons for that. And I think we have to be basing this on facts. I think Brazil is well positioned to be a good player in complement to what the U.S. is doing. It has no reason to conflict with the U.S., so that puts it in a position where it should not have anything to lose, unless they make mistakes or the president blabbers mouth or that kind of thing. But, Brazil is well positioned. On the other hand, like they say, a crisis is an opportunity. We have a world crisis of, uncertainty brought about by very drastic change in Trump policies for the U.S. But that is an opportunity. It's not just a danger. It's a danger to many of those who may not be prepared. But I think those who are prepared, and maybe not because of a lot of merit, but maybe because of its fundamental circumstances, Brazil is better prepared. I won't give credit to the government because I don't think it had a lot to do with government. But Brazil is well positioned. So I think it may be one of the few major players that will get through this relatively unscathed. Whereas, as you can see, Europe will be hurt significantly, even if for no other reason, this deindustrialization trend that will just increase. Energy prices dictate industrialization, and there's no going back for Europe.
So, answering to the title of our podcast today, Consequence for Brazil, there is no huge consequence.
No, not very worrisome.
We are so happy, huh?
Yes,
So
I like that.
So happy, though. It's good to have a friend
It's
like
true.
Trump in the US. Thank you so much, Professor Cleveland Jones. It was a pleasure.
It was fun. Thanks, Divine. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.